Masechet Makkot Daf He. Nu Mishnah. Mishaleshin b'mamon ve'en mishaleshin b'makot. One can divide when it comes to money, but not when it comes to lashes. What does that mean? Kesad. העידו שהוא חייב לחברו 200 זוז, ונמצאו זוממים, משלשים ביניהן. אבל אם העידו שהוא חייב מלכות 40, ונמצאו זוממים, כל אחד ואחד לוקח 40. If there's two witnesses that testify that a certain person has to pay 200 zuz to his friend, and it turns out that those two witnesses are edim zomemin, then they split the value between them. If there are three witnesses that said that he owes 200 zuz, then each of the three will pay 66 for a total of 200. You don't require each one to pay 200. Mishaleshin happens to mean divide into three. So this is assuming that there are three witnesses that would divide it. But in fact, if there were 100 witnesses or two witnesses, whatever it is, if two, they split it by two. If 100, they split it by 100. The point is that all the witnesses that participated and who were found to be edim zome, and then were found to be edim zomemin, they split the cost, and as long as they come up with the number altogether. However, if they testified about someone that he made a sin for which he is liable to lashes, 40 lashes, and they turn out to be edim zomemin, every single one of the witnesses gets 40 lashes. Even if it's two or even if it's 100 witnesses, they all get a full set of 40 lashes. The Gemara asks, what's the source for this? Because it says the word rasha when it comes to people that deserve lashes. And it also says the word rasha regarding capital punishment. So just like regarding capital punishment, you can't give someone half capital punishment. You can't put someone half to death. Let's say there's two people that both testified that this person is liable to capital punishment. So, it's going to get by serefa, let's say. So what are you going to do? You're going to burn half of this witness's body and half of the other witness's body. Either they die or don't die. You can't half die. So just like with capital punishment, you're going to give full capital punishment to both, and you can't split it up. So to Malkut, even though technically, yes, you could give this person 20 and that person 20, but we don't do that because we compare it to capital punishment, so we learn it from a gezer hashava. That's Abaye's answer. Rava has a different answer. We need to do to the witness that which he tried to do to his friend. Each witness tried to give 40 lashes to the defendant, and so we have to do to the witness exactly what he tried to do to his friend. He tried to give 40 lashes, so the witness gets 40 lashes, and the other witness also tried to give 40 lashes, so he gets the full 40 lashes also. We ask about Avai, if so, that should be true for money as well. You say, this guy tried to make him pay 200, so let him pay 200 and the other guy pay 200. Let him feel the full burden of what he tried to do. And the answer is no. Mamon mistaref, malkut la mistaref. Money can join together, combine together. When there's a physical result. If this guy, let's say it's two witnesses, for a total of 200, this guy gives 100, the other guy gives 100. Now we have 200 in our hands. So the result is we have 200 to make the payment of the full restitution or fine, whatever you're going to call it, of 200. Whereas Malkut, it doesn't add up. All right, this guy gets 20, that guy gets 20. You can't combine them together. There's nothing physically there that you can combine together. Furthermore, I'm guessing, but not from experience, that the first 20 lashes don't hurt as much as the last 20. All right, I'm sure once the skin is all raw, the last 20 hurt a lot more. So two people getting first 20 is not the same as one person getting 40. So in any case, you can't make it equivalent. You have to give each of them 40. Next Mishnah. When we only apply the law of edim zomemin when the testimony is about they themselves. It's about the witnesses, not about the content of the testimony. Kesad. Amru me'idin ani beish peloni sheharag et hanefesh. Amru lahem, hech atem me'idin, sharen herag ze o hahoreg hazeh, haya imanu oto hayom b'makom peloni, and elu zomemin. For example, if two witnesses come and say, we testify about this person, that he killed that person. This person is the perpetrator, and that person is the murder victim. And then the second set of witnesses come and say, how could you have testified about that murder? After all, the victim or the defendant that you say is a alleged perpetrator, the alleged murderer, either of them was with us on that very day. So he could not have been doing the murder. He has an alibi. He was with us in a different city. Or the victim was within a different city. So obviously, this murder did not happen then. If that second set of witnesses come, that's edim machishim. They're contradictory, but it's not called edim zomemin. That does not fall under this category, and they don't get the punishment that they tried to give. Aval amru lahem he'achatem ha'edim share atem hayitem imanu oto hayom makom ploni hare elu zomemin v'nehragin al pihem. However, if the second set of witnesses says to the first set of witnesses, how can you testify? How can you say that you testified to this murder on this date and time? After all, you witnesses were with us in a different place at that very moment. So that's what we call edim zomemin. And once the second set comes and says, in fact, you were with us and their testimony is verified, then we give capital punishment to the first set of witnesses. That's when we apply the reciprocal punishment of edim zomemin. Ba'u achirim v'hezimum, afilu me'ah, kulam yeharegu. Now, the chain could go on. What if there's same case as we had before? Two people say, this guy's a murderer. Second set of witnesses says, you were with us in a different city. In that case, the first set of witnesses gets killed. But then a third set of witnesses comes and says, hold on, the second set of witnesses was actually with us in a different place than they said. Second set of witnesses says, well, no, you were with us in Chicago. The third set of witnesses says, no, you were with us in California, so you could not have seen the first set of witnesses. And then a fifth set of witnesses comes and says to the fourth set of witnesses, no, you weren't there because you were with us in some other place, so you couldn't have seen the fourth set of witnesses, who couldn't have seen the third set of witnesses, and so on. If you have such a chain, then all of them get killed because each one in succession, the second set of witnesses tried to kill the first ones, and the third ones tried to kill the second ones, and so on. So then we can go on to a chain, and they will all be killed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, istatit hizo ve'eno neherag el hakat harishona bilbad. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, if you see a thing like that, where it's going on for multiple steps of people testifying against each other, then you know there's a conspiracy here. What are the chances that each person really happened to be in the other spot? This one happened to be in Chicago, and said the ones that said they were in Chicago happened to be with the ones in California. And those very witnesses who said you were with us in California actually happened to be in Canada. And two other witnesses. It's very unlikely for this to happen, and therefore we suspect a conspiracy to someone that is somehow bribing or threatening or controlling witnesses to come and lie about this. And so therefore we only kill the first set of witnesses. They're the ones that tried to kill the defendant, and then we stop there. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay, that chain of tradition, the way I described it, is one opinion. There are other ways to set up this case. You can look in this note for more. Gemara. What's the source for the Mishnah's interpretation that the law of Edim Zomemin only applies when the second set of witnesses comes and testifies about the first witnesses themselves, their own bodies, that they were not in that place? Then that's where the reciprocal punishment applies, and not when the second set of witnesses contradicts part of the content of the testimony of the first witnesses. How do we know that? There's no explicit pasuk. So we see two derivations. Amar Rav Ada, Damar Kedavine Ayed Sheker Ha'ed, Sheker Ana, Ad Shetish Sheker Gufa Shel Edut. Let's see the pasuk inside. It says, Dashu Shoftim Hetev, the judges will look into it closely, and if they find Vine Ayed Sheker Ha'ed, if the one who testified is a false witness, Sheker Ana Ba'chiv, he testified falsely against a fellow Israelite. So the Darasha seems to be reading it as not just Vehene Ayed Sheker, but Sheker Ha'ed. The witness himself is a lie. He wasn't even there. It's not just that the content is, but he himself, and that's what we say, until the body of the testimony is entirely one big lie. It's not this detail or that detail, but rather the testimony itself, because the witness was not even there. A different derivation, Deber bishmal tana, la'anot bo sara, ad shetisare gufa shel edut. This is from a couple of Pesukim earlier, ki yakum et Hamas beish, la'anot bo sara. If someone appears against another party to testify maliciously and gives incriminating yet false testimony. So the derivation here might be from the fact that this is beish, right? Et Hamas beish, la'anot bo. The testimony is about that person. So in Peshat, it's talking about the defendant here, but the word Sarah, which means to pervert, so here's how Rabbi Ishmael is saying it, until the body of the testimony is rendered all perverted, meaning it's not just a detail, but the entire thing. La'anot bo, to the entire testimony, or to the witness himself, that he was not even there, and therefore the whole thing has to be thrown out. Amar Rava, Ba'u Shenayim v'Amru b'Mizrach bira harag Peloni et hanefesh. ובאו שניים ואמרו, הלא במערב בירה עמנו הייתם, חזנן. אי כדקיימי במערב בירה, מחזה חזו למזרח בירה, אין אלו זוממין. ואם לאו, הרי אלו זוממין. So whenever we pick up a typical example, we always say that the murder was in New York, and then the witness says, no, you were with us in Chicago, in a faraway place. But what if it was in a place that was actually close by, two different sides of a building? So one set of witnesses say that we're in the east, and we saw a murder. This person killed that person. And the second set of witnesses says, how could you have seen it on the east side of the building? You were with us on the west side of the building. A bira might be a building. This was also the name of tenement houses. There could be a row of a lot of buildings, or a large one. So we have to go to the building and see, is it possible that if you're standing in the west, you could see all the way to the other side on the east? If you can see from one side to the other, then those witnesses are not edim zoamin. They could be telling the truth. I was on the other side, but look, you could see right through and down there, and then you could see a murder happen. But if it's impossible to see from one side to the other, that it's too far away to see, there's poles blocking your way, there's no way to see it, then that was also a case of edim zoamin. It doesn't have to be far away in a different country. The point is that at that time, they were in a spot where they could not have been a witness. We ask, Pishita, isn't this obvious what Rava says? If you couldn't see there, then that means they could not have testified. Or I might have thought, let's say, if someone has really, really good vision, supervision, then they'd be able to see. So we might think that, yes, it is possible through a little slit that is very far, maybe someone with really good vision could see, and so therefore we should say that they're not edim zomamin. The Kasorava teaches us no. We go with typical vision. A typical person who has normally good vision, if he can see it, okay. But if he can't see it, then they are edim zomamin. ואמר רבא, באו שניים ואמרו בסורה, בספרה, באחד בשבתה הרג פלוני את הנפש. ובאו שניים ואמרו בפניה, באחד בשבתה עמנו הייתם בנהר דעה. Rava says, another similar case, not with space, but with time. If two witnesses come and say, we saw this person commit this murder on Sunday morning in the city of Surah. And then the second set of witnesses come and say, hold on, we saw you in the city of Nehar De'ah on Sunday at the end of the day, towards evening. So they can't be in two places at the same time, but it's not exactly the same time. So we have to judge. Chazinan. Imi safra lepanya maseh azil mesura lahande'ah la havu zomemin. Ve'elav havu zomemin. So let's see. If from the morning until the evening, is it possible to travel from Surah to Nehar De'ah? If it is possible to get there, so then it could very well be that they saw a murder in Surah in the morning, and then they traveled to the Nehar De'ah, and they got there later in that day, and that's where the second set of witnesses saw them. So they are not edim zoamin. But if it's too far away for someone to travel, then obviously they're lying, because no way they could have gotten to Nehar De'ah if they were in Surah in the morning. We ask, Peshita, isn't this point obvious? Well, I might have thought that we have to take into account the possibility that they traveled on a flying camel. Doesn't mean literally a flying camel, but there are in fact racing camels. Most camels that we see are for burden and they go very slow. But but there are camels that can run very fast for a long time. So we might have thought that even if, let's say it's a long distance and you can only get there if you get a really fast camel. So should we assume that, maybe I got there on a really fast camel, and so you should believe me, and they're not edim zoramin. Rava comes to say, no, we follow the typical case. What's a normal pace that people travel? That's what we take into account. And if you could not have gotten from Surat to Nahar De'ah at a normal pace, then we figure that you could not have been there, and that person will be edim zomemin. Amar ve'amar Baal Shanaim v'amru bechad b'shabbatah harag ploni et hanefesh. U'Baal Shanaim v'amru imanu hayitem bechad b'shabbatah ela bitre b'shabbatah harag ploni et hanefesh. Rava says, let's say two witnesses come and say, on Sunday we saw this person commit murder. And then a second set of witnesses come and say, hold on, you were with us on Sunday in a different place, so there's no way that you could have testified about that murder. But the second set of witnesses adds, the truth is that on Tuesday, that same person that you testified did in fact commit murder. So really, he is a murderer anyway. In that case, the first set of witnesses are still called edim zomemin, because at the time that they made their testimony, the guy was not yet a murderer, this defendant. So their testimony is false, even though on the next day he would be a murderer. And by the time the second set of witnesses come and say, hey, your testimony is false, so technically it is true that the defendant is a murderer, but the verdict was not decided yet, and what they saw was not true. So therefore, the first set of witnesses are edim zomemin. ולא עוד אלא, אפילו אמרו ערב שבת הרג פלוני את הנפש נהרגין, דבעידנה דקמס הדק גברה, לאו ברכת lahu. And here's a really big chidush. But the beginning of the case is the same. The first set of witnesses come and say, this guy has murdered someone on Sunday. The second set of witnesses come, let's say on Tuesday, and they say, hold on, did you testify this morning? Let's say the first set of witnesses say it happened on Sunday, and they came to court on Monday in the morning. And then Monday afternoon, the second set of witnesses come and say, no, you were with us in a different place on Sunday, so you could not have been there. But the second set of witnesses adds, we did in fact see the same defendant commit murder last Friday, last week. So the truth is that this guy was already a murderer from beforehand. And so at the time that the first set of witnesses testified, in fact, this guy was in fact already a murderer. Nevertheless, the first set of witnesses is considered edim zomemin. Why? Because at the time that they testified, let's say Monday morning, the defendant was not yet didn't yet have a verdict that he was a murderer. So he's innocent until proven guilty. If there was already a verdict, let's say this guy murdered someone on Friday, and that second set of witnesses, they came already on Sunday morning, and they decided the case, and his verdict was given, he's going to be given capital punishment. He wasn't killed yet, but the verdict was already out. And then what we're calling the first set of witnesses came and said, we saw this guy commit murder on Sunday, on this very day. So in that case, they would not be considered false witness, edim zomemin. Even if the second set of witnesses said, wait, you were not here this entire day on Sunday. Because at the time that they gave their testimony, the defendant was already given a verdict. Once someone is given a verdict to death penalty, they're considered a dead man walking. And therefore, someone that testifies against them, even falsely, are not considered edim zomemin. But that's not the case here. Let's go back to this case, the regular case. On Sunday, these witnesses come and say, or on Monday they come and say, we saw this guy murder yesterday on Sunday. But then the second set of witnesses say, no, on Sunday you were in a different place with us. You could not have seen him murder someone on Sunday, but he did in fact murder someone on Friday. Now, during that, when they came to testify Monday morning, the guy was not yet given a verdict, the defendant, so he was a live man. And so even though later on, the second set of witnesses' testimony will be validated, and the guy will be given a verdict of death penalty and be put to death. Nevertheless, the first set of witnesses are edim zomemin, because at the time that they testified, the defendant, was still a free person, was not yet given a verdict of a death penalty. And now we ask, Mai kamash malan, what chidush is Rava teaching us by this halacha? Tanena, we already see that basic principle in a Mishnah on the next daf that teaches lefichach. Nimset achat mehen zomemet, hu vehen neheragin, v'asheniya petura. Let's say you have two sets of witnesses that both say that this person, this defendant, killed someone on Sunday in this place. And one of those two sets of witnesses is found to be edim zomemin, because yet another set of witnesses says that these two were with us in a different place. However, the other set of witnesses that saw that murder on the same day and the same place, they are not found to be edim zomemin. Their testimony is confirmed. In that case, the defendant, is killed, because there are two valid witnesses that say that he killed on that day. And the other set of witnesses, even though turns out what they testified, what they said in their testimony is true, verified by the other set of witnesses that are good. Nevertheless, because they could not have seen it, so they are called edim zomemin, so they are killed, and the other set of witnesses is exempt. So we see here that we kill the edim zomemin, are called edim zomemin, and given a punishment, even though the defendant that they talked about was in fact guilty, as we find out afterwards. So we already know this principle. That's the same principle that Rava said. And the answer is sefa. We're right. Rava is not teaching us any chidush in the Resha, but he is going to tell us a chidush in the continuation. Sefa ma she'en ken bigbar din istiricha leh. Oh, you're right. What Rava said above is not a chidush. We already know that from the Mishnah. But we need Rava's statement, not for what he said in that part, but for the continuation of his halacha, that is going to say a chidush, that the principle that we just said does not apply if the verdict was already given. And that's why we need Rava's statement. And here's the case. באו שניים ואמרו, באחד בשבתה נגמר דינו של פלוני, ובאו שניים ואמרו, באחד בשבתה עמנו הייתם, אלא בערב שבת נגמר דינו של פלוני. If you have two people come and testify, let's say they're coming to court to actually testify later on Wednesday or whatever, but they say that on Sunday we were there in court with this guy, this defendant, and we heard the verdict come down against him that he is liable to the death penalty. And then two other witnesses, second set of witnesses, come and say, did you just testify that you were in court in New York on Sunday and heard the verdict? Impossible. We saw you in Chicago on Sunday, and so you could not have witnessed that verdict. But it is true that this guy was given a guilty verdict of capital punishment on Erev Shabbat. In this case, since the guy already was declared guilty with the verdict on Erev Shabbat, and for some reason he got away and wasn't killed on that day, otherwise we're supposed to kill him on that same day, he is already a dead man walking. And when the first set of witnesses testified, they were testifying about someone who was already legally dead. And therefore, those first set of witnesses would not get a punishment as edim zomemin. Not only that, velod ela, afilu ameru betre b'shabeta nigmar dino shel peloni en elu neheragin de beidada de Camels hadeh gabra bar ketalahu. Even if the second set of witnesses, let's say they came on Wednesday, and both sets of witnesses came on Wednesday. The first set of witnesses comes and says, we were there, we saw this guy given a guilty verdict on Sunday. And then afterwards, a second set of witnesses says, no, you couldn't have been there because you were with us on Sunday, a different place. But we do testify that he was given a guilty verdict yesterday, on Monday. That case also, the first set of witnesses are not killed. They are not edim zomemin, because at the time that they testified, the defendant, had already been given a guilty verdict, as we find out from the second witnesses, and therefore they are not edim zomemin. That's the principle that Rava is teaching us. That's new. From the Mishnah, we would only know the principle that if someone did in fact do a crime, but the defendant committed a crime, and edim zomemin the content of their testimony is true, but they didn't see it, they are called edim zomamin, even though this guy actually committed the crime. That is true. That's a true principle that the Mishnah says. Ravaz, however, is saying an exception. But if the guy was already given a guilty verdict of capital punishment, then someone testifies about it falsely, they are not edim zomamin because he's already a dead man. And that's true not only for the death penalty, but also for a payment of a fine. And here's a full example of the first case and the second case. Two people come and testify. This man, this defendant, on Sunday, he stole an animal, slaughtered it, or sold it, and therefore he has to pay a fine of 4 or 5 times. No, on Sunday you were with us in a different place. There's no way you saw that crime happen. But it is true that he did do just that. He stole and killed or sold it on Tuesday. So he was in fact guilty of the crime, but they didn't see it. And therefore they are edim zomamin, and those first set have to pay that fine. And even if the second set of witnesses say that he committed the crime beforehand, on Friday, before the Sunday that they said. So he already did commit the crime before they even said that, before Sunday, when they said, the first set of witnesses said he committed the crime. Nevertheless, they are edim zomamin. Why? Because at the time that the first set of witnesses testified, the guy was not yet liable to pay. He did do the crime, but you don't have to pay for the crime until a court comes and says you're guilty and says you have to pay. And therefore, at that point, he was an innocent man, presumed innocent. And so the witnesses are guilty and have to pay. However, if a first set of witnesses come and say on Sunday, this guy stole and slaughtered or sold, and he was brought to court, and the court said you have to pay 4 times or you have to pay 5 times. And the second set of witnesses come and say, no, you could not have seen all that happen on Sunday because you were with us in a different place. However, the second set of witnesses testifies that he did all that and was given a guilty punishment on Friday. In that case, the first set of edim are not edim zomamin because they were testifying about someone who was already liable and given a verdict when they testified. And the And not only that, even if the second set of witnesses comes and says, listen, actually, what you said about the Sunday is true, that on that day he did steal and he either slaughtered or sold, and on the next day, on Monday, he was given a guilty verdict. In that case also, even though he was given that verdict on Monday and not on Sunday, as the first witnesses said, nevertheless, the first set of witnesses are not edim zomamin because at the time that they testified, let's say they testified on Wednesday or sometime thereafter, when they testified, this defendant had already been guilty and given a verdict by the court. And since they were already guilty, you don't call someone edim zomamin, remember, only if they tried to do it and it didn't work. But this guy actually was already guilty. So you can't say try to do it. He would have had to pay anyway because he was already a guilty man with a verdict. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, istatit hi zo. The next part of the Mishnah says that if there's a chain of edim zomamin, and there are a couple of ways to explain the case that the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda are disagreeing about. One explanation is that one set of witnesses says that this defendant is liable to murder, and then second set of witnesses says the first set of witnesses, they couldn't have seen it because they were with us in Chicago. A third set of witnesses comes and says no, the second set of witnesses couldn't have seen the first set of witnesses in Chicago because they were with us in California, and so on and so forth. And it could go even 100 steps. And according to Tanna Kama, you'd kill all of them because each one of them, the third, tried to give the second capital punishment, and the fourth the same for the third, and so they could all be killed down the line. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, there's something weird going on here. Every single one saw the other one in that place. It looks like there's a conspiracy. Someone is arranging something. That's one way of explaining it. The other way of explaining the case is that the first set of witnesses testify about this defendant, that he's a murderer. Second set of witnesses says, no, they're with us somewhere else. So those first set of witnesses get killed. Then another set of witnesses comes in and talks about the defendant and says the same thing. This guy, we saw him commit murder. Again, the second set of witnesses who already testified before, the Edim Mizimin, are Edim Mizimin again for the fourth set of witnesses. And then the fifth set of witnesses comes and talks about the defendant himself. In other words, all the rest of them, except for the second set, are talking about the defendant himself that says he's a murderer. And the second set of witnesses is saying again and again, they're with us, they're with us, they're with us. And in that case, Tanna Kama says they all get killed, and Rabbi Yehuda says there's some kind of conspiracy going on. Somebody's defending this this defendant and hiring the second set of witnesses to say edim mizimim and testify about everybody that they could not have seen it, and that's what's suspicious. Okay, so either explanation, let's see the analysis. If there indeed is a conspiracy, and you're not going to kill the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way to the 100th sets of witnesses, then how come the first set of witnesses, Rabbi Yehuda says, oh, it's a conspiracy, only kill the first set of witnesses? If there's a conspiracy going on, then why are you killing the first set of witnesses? They should also stay alive. Rabbi Abu says, talking about a case where we already killed the first set of witnesses. So what could we do? If you hadn't killed them yet, you're right, we would keep them alive. But we already killed them, and that's why the Mishnah says, well, we already killed the first ones, but from now on, we're not going to kill anybody else. But that answer doesn't make sense. You wouldn't have to make a ruling to Rabbi says in the ruling, you only kill the first. If they're already killed, then what happened. You can't bring them back to life anyway. So that they should say, don't kill anyone. If they already were killed, well, what could we do? So it doesn't make sense to make it a halachic ruling. Rava says, if there's only one set of witnesses all together, then you kill it. If there's one set of witnesses that said this guy killed, and the second set says they are Edim Zoamin, that's a classic case of just plain Edim Zoamin, and that's when they're killed. But if there's more, once there's now a first, a second, a third, once there's a third set of witnesses that come and testify either about the second set of witnesses or about the defendant, then it's already becoming a chain, then don't kill anyone. That's what it means. That's Rava's answer. But we reject that also because it's ha bilvad ka'amar kashya. It says only kill the first ones. That means that there are many sets of witnesses, and even though there are many, you only kill the first, but not anybody else. And we leave this as a difficulty. Okay, it seems somehow that the first set of witnesses, since that's the standard case, so okay, they testify, they are lying, and then once it comes more, then it gets out of hand, so then we don't kill anymore. But the first one remains like a standard case, something like that. But so there are two answers here, to be Abu and Rava, but the Gemara is not totally happy with either of them. We have a story about a woman who brought witnesses that testified of something that would be in her benefit. Maybe they testified that some guy owes her $1,000. But then those witnesses were found to be false witnesses. So then she brings another set of witnesses, and they too are found to be false. And she brings even a third set of witnesses, also about the same thing. This guy owes me $1,000, and they also are found to be false. So she keeps bringing these witnesses, and they keep being found to be liars. Amar Resh Lakish, Resh Lakish says that she, at this point, is not going to be trusted anymore. She has a chazakah of hiring false witnesses, and therefore, that's it. We drop her case, and we reject any future witnesses that she tries to bring, because we see a pattern, right? Once, twice, 3 times, so that's it. Amar le Rabbi Elazar. Im hi huchsika, kol yisam mi huchsiku. Rabbi Elazar disagrees. He said, okay, even if she has a chazakah that she is lying, but is all of the rest of Israel have a chazakah that they're lying? In other words, each new set of witnesses, that's two new people. And so you can't assume that everybody in the world are liars just because she is a liar. When two witnesses come, we have to treat them as if it's a totally new case. Here's two witnesses, two new people. They have no presumption. They have no prior status of being liars. So just because they happen to be testifying on behalf of this woman and she is a liar, doesn't mean that the witnesses we can assume to be liars. And therefore the Rabbi Elazar says, we're going to accept no matter how many times witnesses come on her behalf who are testifying, each one we have to assume could be telling the truth and treat them the same as we would treat any witnesses because the chazakah is on her, but not about the new witnesses who will come from all the rest of the nation. Zimnin havu yatbe kami de Rabbi Yochanan. On another occasion, the rabbis Resh Lakish and Rabbi Elazar, these two rabbis who had this argument, they were sitting before Rabbi Yochanan, who was their colleague teacher. Ata ki hai ma'aseh lekamayhu. And exactly this case, just like that, came before them, a woman who kept bringing false witnesses. Amar Resh Lakish huchzika zo. Resh Lakish said his opinion again. That's it. She has a chazakah that she's a liar and she hires false witnesses. We're not accepting any more testimony on her behalf. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan im huchzika zo. Koisa mi huchziku. This time Rabbi Yochanan, not Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar is sitting there on the side. And Rabbi Yochanan says the argument, even if she has a chazakah to be a liar, does that mean everybody else in the Jewish nation has a chazakah to be a liar? These are two new witnesses that came from elsewhere, so we can't assume that they are liars. We have to listen to their testimony. Hadar chazyeh leRabbi Elazar bishut. At that point, Resh Lakish turned and gave an angry glare at Rabbi Elazar. Amar le shemat mili mi bar napacha vela amart li mishemeh. He says, I see now that what you said before, Rabbi Elazar said this argument first. But now Resh Lakish realizes this matter that you said earlier, you heard it from Bar Napacha. That's the full name, Rabbi Yochanan Bar Napacha, the son of a blacksmith. You heard it from Bar Napacha, and you didn't say it in his name. Had I known that you were quoting Rabbi Yochanan, I would not have said my opinion in front of Rabbi Yochanan. I would have kept quiet. I would have accepted what Rabbi Yochanan says that, and he's here, and he's the senior rabbi, so I would have deferred to him. And now you caused me to be embarrassed in front of Rabbi Yochanan, because I'm coming and saying my opinion, which I did. I disagreed with you, but they are not, Rabbi Elazar is a fellow student. They're kind of colleagues, but students of Rabbi Yochanan. So you should have told me that you heard it from Rabbi Yochanan, and then I would have deferred to him. And now I'm saying my opinion, and you made Rabbi Yochanan contradict me in public. Okay, that's an interesting story. Now that we see that there is a machloket, in fact, it seems that Resh Lakish would agree with Rabbi Yehuda, who also says that when there's a pattern of suspicious behavior, then we say there's a conspiracy, and that's it. We invalidate all of that testimony. Rabbi Yehuda says it when there's a chain of edim that are each coming one after the other, and say, okay, if it's one, we accept it, but now it's already 2, 3, that's it. There's something suspicious, so we don't accept that further, although for that further testimony. And Resh Lakish said the same thing. If a woman brings witnesses once, twice, 3 times, and they're all liars, then we say there's something else going on. Here's a conspiracy, and we reject future testimony. And Rabbi Yochanan will follow Rabbanan. Rabbanan say, every new set of witnesses, they came from elsewhere. It's a new case, a new set of witnesses, and therefore we have to accept them no matter what. Doesn't matter the fact that there were previously other witnesses that were found to be liars in the chain of Edim Zomimin. And so Rabbi Yochanan says the same thing, even though a woman brought many sets of false witnesses, but the next one, they're new people themselves, and we treat them equally. Amalach Resh Lakish, Ana de Amri Lach Afilu L'Rabbanan. Resh Lakish says, I can explain my position even according to Rabbanan. I don't want to be stuck only following Rabbi Yehuda, the minority opinion, and so I can explain myself even according to Rabbanan in the Mishnah. Ad kan la ka'am amri Rabbanan hatam deleka deka mehadad. Avalacha Ika ha deka mehadera. The Rabbanan in the Mishnah, they say in that case you believe all the witnesses. Let's say it's a chain of edim zomemin, and the second is going to cause the first to die, and the third causes the second to die, and so on. Even the 100th will kill the 99th, will cause the 99th to get a capital punishment. And there we would believe all of them because there's no one person that is benefiting from all those people dying. Each of them are separate cases, and so the 53rd has found the 51st somewhere, but these are all separate individuals that are coming, each testifying against the one before. But there's no one person that could be benefiting from all of that and masterminding the whole thing. It's not likely. So therefore we accept everyone. Whereas in this case of the woman, it's clear that all of these witnesses are coming and saying that someone owes this woman $1,000. So she's the one that's benefiting from all of these witnesses. So it seems clearer here that she is the one masterminding and creating this conspiracy. And that's why I could follow Rabbanan. Rabbanan would agree with me. In that case of all different people in a chain, that's that we believe all of them. But if it's all one woman and they're all testifying for her benefit, then we should not believe the future witnesses. Rabbi Yochanan amar lach ana damri afilu Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, Rabbi Yochanan is following the Banan, but he wants to be according to everyone. He also doesn't want to exclude himself from following Rabbi Yehuda, and he says even Rabbi Yehuda could agree with my position. Ad kan la kamar Rabbi Yehuda hatam damrina natu kule alma gabe hanu havu kaimi avalacha hane yad'e besahaduta v'hane la yad'e besahaduta. Rabbi Yehuda only said that we don't accept the testimony of all the continuous set of witnesses in the case of the Mishnah, because in that case we wonder, what, is everybody in the world, were they all together with this set of witnesses? The language here makes better sense with the second explanation that we gave, that there's one set of witnesses that say, we saw this guy kill someone on Sunday. Second set of witnesses says, no, on Sunday you were with us in Chicago. Then a third set of witnesses say, this defendant, we saw him kill someone on Sunday or on Monday, whatever. And then the second set of witnesses says, no, on Monday you were with us in California. And then a fourth set of witnesses says, oh, we saw this guy, he killed someone on a certain day. And the second set of witnesses says, no, that day you were with us somewhere else. So this already doesn't make sense. All the witnesses, everybody in the world, were they all with this second set of witnesses? Like anyone who comes, the same set of me'edim mizimim say, you're with us, you're with us. Everybody was with them? So that's very suspicious. It looks like that's a conspiracy. However, in this case of halacha, it could very well be that when the woman comes and she brings witnesses that say, yeah, this guy owes her $1,000, they're found to be liars. The second one's found to be liars because they didn't know. But then eventually someone comes and they say it, and because they do know. The other people, they just heard it as hearsay. They heard it from somebody else. They thought. But it could be that they are in fact all liars. But one person actually knows that it's the truth. And so that's why Rabbi Yochanan says, I could agree with Rabbi Yehuda in the case of the Mishnah that is more suspicious. But Rabbi Yehuda might very well agree that in the case of one woman, where there's many people testifying on her behalf, that yes, all of them are liars, except for one who actually happens to have been there and know the truth. Next Mishnah. En ha'edim zomemin neheragin ad sheyigamer hadin. Sheres sadukin omrim ad sheyehareg shenemar nefesh tachat nafesh. The edim zomemin only get the death penalty if the verdict has already been given, but before the defendant is actually killed. There's a certain amount of time. It has to be on the same day, but it could be later on in the day. They come up with the verdict, the judges all vote, and they decide, and they tell him, you are going to get this type of capital punishment, and they might do it sometime in the afternoon, and then there might be a couple of hours until they actually kill him, sometime towards the end of the day. If the second set of witnesses comes and says, at that time, these first two witnesses were with us in a different place, that is when we give that first set of witnesses capital punishment as edim zomemin. That is the halacha. But this disagrees with the Sadukin, the Sadducees. They say that you only give capital punishment to the first set of witnesses, the Edim Zomimim, if they actually killed the defendant. If the verdict, not only the verdict, but also the capital punishment is actually done, the defendant was killed, and then the second set of witnesses comes and says, these first guys were liars, that is when the first set of witnesses is killed. Which makes some logical sense, because why should you kill witnesses if nothing actually happened? Maybe you say it's attempted, but you don't give capital punishment for attempted murder, so they didn't actually kill him. Doesn't it make more sense to kill someone if they actually caused the death of the defendant? Which the Gemara will address. Amru lahem chachamim, v'lo kevar ne'eman v'asitem lo kasher zamam la'asot la'achiv, v'areh achiv kayam. And the rabbis say, we have a proof from the pasuk, because it says that you will do to him, to the false witness, as he tried to do to his brother or to his fellow. So that means that his brother, is still alive. You wouldn't call him as you tried to do to your brother if the brother wasn't around anymore, and you also wouldn't say kasher zamam, as he tried to do. That means he tried but was not successful. So you see that this pasuk is assuming that although they tried, that it's le'achiv, he's still here. You tried to kill him, but he's still alive. That's when you kill the Ed Zomim. Now, the rabbis have to address the proof of the Sadukim, because it says in that context that you take life for a life, which if you take that literally means only if they killed a person, the defendant, only then do they get the death penalty themselves, but not if they didn't actually go ahead with killing. So the rabbis say, we have something important to learn from the term nefesh tachat nafesh. Without it, I might have thought that as soon as the witness testimony is accepted as valid testimony, then at that point forward, if the second set of witnesses come, then they would be killed. But it's not true. There's a time gap between the acceptance of the testimony and giving of the verdict. So this is how it works. The witnesses come in, and we test them one by one. And we do hakira, dirisha, ask them all kinds of questions, make sure they line up. And at some point they say, okay, we certify this testimony. This testimony is valid, and we accept it. We bring it into the court docket for discussion. Then the judges go and they deliberate on the matter. Just because the witnesses, their testimony is true, yes, this guy killed that guy on that day, doesn't necessarily mean that there's capital punishment. Maybe he acted in self-defense, maybe it was shogeg, maybe there's other factors that they have to bring into effect. So they have to judge all those things, even if the witnesses were indeed found to be valid. And so during that time period, until there's a verdict, so then we don't know what the verdict would have been. So the fact that these witnesses were liars, we can't kill the witnesses because maybe the verdict would have been innocent anyway for whatever other reason. And that's what we learned from Nefesh Tachat Nafesh. We only kill the witnesses if the verdict was given. Once the verdict is given, the defendant is legally dead, even if not biologically dead, because once the court says, you are going to get capital punishment in 3 hours from now, that's it. He's a dead man walking. And so since it's so sure that we're going to kill him, then we say the Edim Zomim are responsible with their lives. Tana, Be'Rebi Omer, Lo Hargu Nehedagin. Hargu and Nehedagin. Be'Rebi is not a specific person. It's the son of Rabbi, the son of a distinguished rabbi. So it doesn't say who the rabbi was, but some son of a distinguished rabbi put the halacha in the following aphorism. If the Edim Zomimim did not kill the defendant, then they are killed. But if they succeeded in killing the defendant, then the Edim Zomimim are not killed. Once the defendant is killed, that's it. It's too late. This was already done, and then the law of Edim Zomimim does not apply anymore. Amar Aviv, Beni, Lav Kavachomer. So the father of this son of a distinguished rabbi, meaning the distinguished rabbi whose son said this aphorism, his father said, isn't this a Kavachomer? Can't you learn if we kill the Edim Zomimim when they tried unsuccessfully to kill the defendant? All the more so if they succeed in killing the defendant, then the Edim Zomimim certainly should get capital punishment. That makes a lot of sense. So how do we defend the halacha against against this reasoning. Amar lo lima detanu rabenu she'en onshim min hadin. And the son said, Father, you yourself taught us the rule that we do not give a punishment of a death penalty based on deen, meaning based on reason. Reason, although it's very convincing, and we have to use reason to explain things and to derive one law from another, but when it comes, right now we're talking about capital punishment, you're going to go and kill someone because I have a logical argument. These logical arguments of kal vachomer, they're not mathematical proofs. As we see, there's lots of machloket about them, and one says it this way, and someone says, no, maybe the key point is another factor, is you can make the chomer kal and the kal chamur, and so we're not going to kill someone based on a kal vachomer. That's a general rule. How do we know this rule? This rule is itself derived from a law in the Torah. And here's the Braita from which we learn the rule. Tanya, Ish asher yikach et achoto bat aviv o bat imo. En li ela bat aviv shelo bat imo. Ubat imo shelo bat aviv. Bat imo bat aviv minayin. Talmud omar ervat achoto gila. A pasuk says in Vayikra 20, that's the chapter that lists all the arayot with the punishments. And it says a person may not take his sister who is the daughter of his father or the daughter of his mother. So it lists two cases, a paternal and maternal sister. So from that part of the pasuk, I only know that one is prohibited to his paternal sister, half-sister, or maternal half-sister. But what if it's his full sister? Torah didn't talk about that. So if you continue, the pasuk says, Ervat achoto gila, he has uncovered the nakedness of his sister. That third phrase is coming to teach you a full sister. Okay, so it has all three cases here. But then we wonder, Ad shelo yomad yeshli badin. Even without that phrase of the pasuk, even if it didn't say Ervat achoto gila, I could figure it out on my own with a kal vachomer. Ima nashal bat aviv shelo bat imo shelo bat aviv o bat imo lo kol sheken. If you're going to punish someone with capital punishment for someone who's only a half sister, a half paternal, a half maternal, then all the more so if it's a sister on both sides. If it's a full sister, right? Isn't that logical? Right? That's even a closer relationship than either half sister. So why does the Torah have to say Ervat achoto gila if I could have figured out based on a kal vachomer? It's to teach you this very principle that do not rely on a kal vachomer. If you could have relied on a kal vachomer, then the Torah wouldn't have to say it. The Torah says achoto to say full sister in order to teach you in general. Do not rely on a kal vachomer to apply the death penalty. Only if the Torah says it explicitly. Good. The Braita continues. We already have our answer, but the Braita continues with more. On the Shema Anu Azara Minayin. That has to do with the punishment. But remember, for every punishment that the Torah says, we need another pasuk that's going to give us the warning. So where do we see a warning for all of these cases related to sister? Talmud lomar ervat achotecha bat avicha o bat imecha. En li ela bat aviv shelo bat imo, bat imo shelo bat aviv. Bat aviv u bat imo minayin. Talmud lomar ervat bat eshet avicha moledet avicha achotecha hi. So we're going to learn the warning from, this is Vayikra chapter 18, which is also a long list of arayot, but there it doesn't have punishments. It just says this is not allowed. And so that's the section of warning. And then there it says the nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father or daughter of your mother. So this is mentioning the two half-sisters. Well, but this pasuk, I only know a warning for a paternal half-sister or a maternal half-sister, but not from the other side, only a half-sister. But what if it's a full sister? How do I know? Well, in that same perek, two pisukim later, there's another pasuk that says the nakedness of the daughter of your father's wife, who was born of your father, she is your sister. So this is an added pasuk. Like, what's it adding to the one before? Some say that this is talking about a step-sister, that it was only from the wife, or someone born out of wedlock. So, okay, some kind of other case. But it doesn't matter. The point is it says, achotechahi, and that's referring to a full sister. So there you go. This is a warning for a full sister. Now we ask about the azhara also. You could have learned it from a kal vachomer. Ad shelo yomar. Even if you didn't have this last pasuk, yesh li min adin. Ma imuzhar al bat imo shelo bat aviv shelo bat imo bat imo lo kol sheken. Halamadata she'en mazirin min hadin. Since I have the pasuk that says a half sister is prohibited, and that's an azhara, maternal side, paternal side. So don't I know that a full sister all the more so, that would be azhara. So we learn from here that en mazirin min adin, also the azhara, to know that it's prohibited, even with that before we know the punishment is, that we also do not learn from a kal vachomer. And therefore, we see, not only do we not punish based on apply a punishment based on the kal vachomer, we do not even apply a prohibition of capital punishment that has to do with capital punishment on based on the kal vachomer. But Aita continues, chayavim al kiyot minayin. You told me about capital punishment. What about lashes? Can I learn lashes from a kal vachomer, that this guy deserves lashes and this person is even worse, so all the more so deserves lashes? And he says no. Talmud Omar rasha rasha. This is from a gezer hashava. It says the word rasha regarding capital punishment. It also says the word rasha regarding lashes. So we learn from the imbin hakot harasha. So from there we learn that the same rule applies to lashes. What about to send someone to galut, like someone who kills bishogeg? So can we learn that this person has to, the Torah says, goes to exile, to Ir Miklat, and then we say, oh, this person's even worse, so for all the more so that other person will go into exile? No, you can't do that either, based on a kal vachomer, because it says the word roseach, both regarding someone who kills on purpose and someone who kills by mistake. And therefore, we learn from capital punishment, which is someone who kills on purpose, and you don't do en lonshim min adin there, to someone who kills by mistake, who's also called a roseach. This actually is really important, because to go into exile is actually a privilege. You get to get atonement and be safe from the goel hadam. Only someone who kills bishogeg gets that privilege. Someone who is even worse doesn't necessarily get that privilege. So that's why these punishments, you can't just apply a punishment for based on a kal vachomer, because there's many different factors that go into giving someone something that's a greater punishment or a lesser punishment or something appropriate to that particular example that doesn't easily map onto a different case that happens to be more stringent or less stringent in a different issue. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai, Et Eben Echamaim lo haragti ed zomem lo asim liban shel sadukim, sheyomrim en adim zomemin heragin ad sheyehareg hanidon. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai says, he makes a swear formula, may I not see the future consolation of the Jewish people if I did not kill an Ed Zomem he tried to kill someone but didn't. And you know what? I gave a verdict for that Ed Zomem that he deserves capital punishment. And why did I do that? I was really happy to do that, because that way I could stick it to the Sadokim to show that they're wrong. Because the Sadokim said that you only kill Adim Zomemin if the defendant that they were accusing was actually killed. But I dealt with a case where the verdict was given, but the defendant was not actually killed, and I said, oh, you're an Ed Zomem, and I killed the Ed Zomem. Now notice he says Ed Zomem in singular, not Edim Zomemin. So this was a case where you have two witnesses came and said, this guy is a murderer. And then only one of those witnesses was found to be Ed Zomem. A second set of witnesses come and say, we saw this one of the two witnesses with us in Chicago, but the other one was not found to be Ed Zomem. And nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai killed that one guy because he wanted the opportunity to show the Sadukim that they're wrong. Amar lo Shimon ben Shatach, Erei ben Nechama, im lo shafachta dam naki, shere amru chachamim, en ha'edim zomemin, heragin ad sheyizommu shenehem, ve'enokin ad sheyizommu shenehem. Shimon ben Shatach, Rabbi ben Tabai, these were part of the pairs, the zugot of the early sages during the times of the second Bet HaMikdash. And Shimon ben Shatach says, may I not see the consolation of the Jewish people if you did not spill innocent blood. In other words, Yehuda ben Tabai, you should not have done that. Interesting, calls it Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai here. In Pirkei Avot, he's just Yehuda ben Tabai, because in those early zugot, they didn't have the title rabbi yet. Okay, in any case, so he says, what you did was wrong. You shed innocent blood. Why? Because the rabbi said, we do not declare edim zomemin, we do not kill them unless both or all of the edim zomemin. We'll see in the next Mishnah that even if there are more, so you have to do all of them. If there's two, then both of them have to be found to be edim zomemin. You need the second set of witnesses to come and say, both of these witnesses, all of the first set of witnesses, were with us in some other place. And not only for capital punishment, also, and lokin ad she'izomu shenehem, we do not give lashes to, if its first set of witnesses says, this guy deserves lashes, and then the second set of witnesses comes and says, one of the first set of witnesses was with us in another place, then none of the edim zomin get lashes, unless both of them were found to be conspiring witnesses. And so, Yehuda ben Tabai, you applied the law of edim zomin incorrectly in your zeal to show up the Sadokim. You killed a single witness, but you're not supposed to kill a single witness only if both of them are adim zomemin. Miyad kibel alav Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai sheno more hora'a ela lifnei Shimon ben Shatach. Immediately, Yehuda ben Tabai says, I'm never going to teach a practical halacha unless I'm in front of Shimon ben Shatach, because he's the great master, and see how he caught a mistake of mine. He admitted that, yes, he made a mistake, and so he says, from now on, yes, I will teach, I will rule, but only if Shimon ben Shatach is there to back me up, so I know I'm not making a mistake. V'chol yamav shel Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai haya mishtatech al kibro shel oto ha'ed v'haya kolo nishma v'chispurin ha'am lomar kolo shel harug amar koli sheli hu tedeu lemachar hu met and kolo nishma. All the rest of days of Yehuda ben Tabai, he would go and prostrate on the grave of that witness that was single ed zomem that he made die, although actually he wasn't ed zomem, so he was not the almost innocent guy, but still he was not supposed to get capital punishment. So Yehuda ben Tabai felt bad, and he would lie down on his grave and pray, and his voice was heard. Whose voice was heard? People thought it was the voice of the victim, that he was calling out from the ground, right? You killed me too early. And Yehuda ben Tabai says, no, it's not the voice of the victim, but rather my voice. I'm screaming so loud in prayer and in repentance. And you should know that tomorrow, I mean not literally tomorrow, but in the future, when he dies, Yehuda ben Tabai is referring to himself, when I die, you will stop hearing that voice. So you know it's actually my voice. I am crying so much because I have so much remorse. It's not actually the voice of the dead. Amar le Ravacha bered Rava le Ravashe dilma bedina kam behadeh iname payuse paiseh. Ravacha, the son of Rava, tells Ravashe, actually Yehuda ben Tabai's proof that when I die you won't hear it anymore is not actually a good proof, because maybe it is in fact the voice of the one who was killed, that one Ed Zomem, the whole time. But when Yehuda ben Tabai dies, then he will stand for judgment up in heaven, and then the deceased will stop crying out. Or maybe then they will meet, and Yehuda ben Tabai will appease, he will apologize, and then that Ed Zomem will be appeased and will stop crying out. So when Yehuda ben Tabai dies, and we stop hearing the voice, we won't know actually, was it because he died and it was his voice, or because he was judged or appeased the Ed Zomem, and that's why the Ed Zomem stopped crying out. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.